If you feel like you missed your opportunity to invest in real estate, and that if you just started a decade ago, like it feels like everybody else did, that you'd be so much further ahead, I'm here to tell you, and actually not just tell you, but show you using an example deal that I'm sitting in right now that we literally just purchased this year. We got it all set up and are about to go live with it as a short-term rental. And I'm going to show you why a deal like this can absolutely crush it in today's environment, and how you can actually buy a property and why it's going to perform in terms of cash on cash. So the amount of return on a monthly basis, the profit compared to every dollar that we put into it, why it's higher than probably 95% of other real estate deals out there. I'm Kirby Atwell, and I help regular people create significant cash flow with deals just like this. So if you're interested in working with me on something like that, you can go to the link that's in the description of this video. You can set up a call with me personally, and we can talk through your goals and the details of that program. We can talk about whether it's a good fit. So this property brings my wife and I up to 39 short-term rental listings that we own. And this is a 5-unit property. It's located in Valparaiso, Indiana, which is a cool, pretty affordable town, just about an hour outside of Chicago. And it's got some local draws. You know, this property is about 2 blocks from a really cool downtown area where they just built a big distillery, and there's Valparaiso University right there, and we're not too far from Indiana Dunes National Park and Lake Michigan. So it's kind of a cluster of a lot of different factors. But the great news is that there's these little pockets just like this all across the country where this can work really well. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how we found the property, how we got everything set up, some of the decision making that we made, and ultimately how that leads to really high ROI or performance so that you can replicate this exact same thing in your target market. So the fact is that most short-term rentals, especially in the traditional short-term rental areas, just don't cash flow today. So how did we find this property that performs so well? The interesting thing is that we buy almost all of our properties, and most of the people that we work with buy their properties off the MLS, which I know is super counterintuitive because it feels like, especially in today's environment, you have to buy these needle in the haystack off-market deals that are the only ones that are going to bring in a good return. And the fact is, if you know these pockets where it's the perfect combination of factors and you're buying a property that has multiple streams of income coming in, you can often find a really high cash flowing property right on the MLS. So this property popped up on the MLS. This was the end of last year, November of 2024. And I went out and took a look at it with my realtor. We walked through, and after I ran all my numbers and everything, I was like, you know, it would still cash flow at what they're asking. They're asking $519 for this 5-unit property, but it needed a ton of work. And so I knew I was going to have to go through a big rehab, and I knew that to have a little bit of equity in the property when we're done, which is really the only reason you should go through a rehab. If not, just buy something turnkey at market price. But if you're going to go through rehab, you want to have a little bit of equity. And I knew that I really needed it closer to $400,000 than $500,000. And it was at $519. And so I went back to my realtor. I said, look, and this is a strategy I typically use to negotiate on MLS deals, where I say, look, this probably just isn't going to work for me. I need to be closer to 400 than 500. And so, of course, you know, what are they going to say? Oh, that we'd never sell it for that, right? You know, that's over $100,000 less than what we're listing it for. So we would never sell it for that. And so I say, that's fine, you know, but if anything else change or anything ever changes, give me a call. And so that kind of sets the stage to be in a position down the road to potentially get it for a much lower price. You're not insulting because you didn't really put in an offer. You just said, yeah, it's not going to work for me because I need to be at X, Y, and Z price. So you really kind of gave them an offer without submitting an actual offer. And so lo and behold, over the next several months leading up to midwinter, they just started doing price drops. And then when they were at like 450, they called me and they said, okay, we've dropped it a lot. We're ready to sell it to you for 450. And I was like, well, you know, I said I need to be closer to 400. And so we negotiated back and forth, and eventually we landed on 415 for this property. And it needed a big rehab. I knew that going into it, but I knew I could build up some equity and we could make 5 really awesome short-term rental units in here that are going to cash flow really, really well. The great part about this strategy, though, is you don't have to buy a property that you do this big rehab to. You can buy a property that's turnkey right off the MLS that cash flows really, really well using this strategy, if you pick the right area and you pick especially these small multi-unit properties or multiple streams of income, even if it's like something that's kind of outside the box, like it's got a finished basement or a finished garage that you can turn into a separate unit, these can do really, really well without ever doing any rehab at all. I don't recommend doing big rehabs if you're just getting started. So then the big question comes up of how do you finance a deal like this? So we move forward with the purchase at $415, knowing that the property was pretty rough, pretty ugly, needed a full, pretty much gut rehab. And so we're gonna put in about $175,000 into the rehab. So we had to borrow the $415 plus the $175,000. And so what we did is we put a little bit of our own money into it, but we also went to private investors. These are just friends, family, people in our network that we knew, that we said, you know what, would you like a double-digit return? Would you like a 10% return on your money to invest in a property that you can see is going to be worth much, much more when we're finished? So we're going to buy it at $415. We're going to put $175 into it, but the after repair value that we're estimating is between $700,000 and $800,000. So we're going to build a bunch of equity, then we can refinance out into a long-term 30-year fixed rate DSCR loan is what they're called. It's just a investment loan that pretty much anyone can get for a property that cash flows. So the intent was to buy it with private money, 10% interest, fix it up with private money, and then get it reappraised for the new value. And then the bank gives you that DSCR loan for 75% of the value. So we could take out most of the cash that we have into it and pay back our private lenders at that point. So that's exactly what we're doing. Actually, while I was filming this, just how the appraiser called. They're coming on Monday to appraise this property so that we can get all of our cash out of it, or most of our cash out of it, so that we can move forward with starting to rent it out. So as we've added more and more short-term rentals over the years, we've learned some things and tweaked some things around what it is that we can do in the decision-making throughout the whole deal process to end up with the highest ROI type of property and the one that our guests are really going to love staying in. And so one of the first things that we did is something that I've alluded to several times, and that is focus purely on multiple streams of income. So find a good multi-unit property, which again can be creative. This one, in this case, it looks like a big house from the outside, but it's been divided into 5 units, and they desperately needed to be rehabbed. They were all run down, but you could see the potential with these 5 units. So we know in an area like this, just like many areas, there's a lot of either couples or small families that will travel, that want to be close to downtown, want to be close to all the attractions. Can be a kind of a perfect setup for them. Also, at the same time, there's large groups that travel here, especially in the peak season. In the off season, it's mostly all small groups. So if you buy this huge property that's a single family home, it might do well in the summertime, but then it sits vacant almost the entire winter, and you've got this huge cleaning fee, and there's not these big groups that are going to travel. But because we're buying 5 smaller units that each sleep 4, we can accommodate the small groups, especially in the off season. But then in the summertime, we have what we call a super listing, where we put all 5 units together in one listing. So somebody can rent the entire building or the entire house, all 5 units together. And so a lot of times it's like wedding parties, it's family reunions, it's just friend groups that are traveling together. Again, especially during the peak travel season when they're willing to pay a premium. So if it can sleep 20, it's not that expensive to pay over $1,000 a night when you're dividing it amongst 5 different families or 5 different couples. And so because of that, we get such great versatility, and you can maximize both seasons. So now when it comes to the design or the furnishings or creating the experience, which you'll be thinking a lot about as you're setting it up, it's important to recognize that guests choose the Airbnb or the short-term rental that they're going to stay in almost purely based on emotion. And so a lot of people will adopt this strategy of having multiple units, and then they set them all up the exact same. So you've got the same replication of listings in the same location. And so there's nothing that really stands out. And so we knew that it would be much more beneficial for us to look like 5 totally separate properties, because they're all going to kind of be in the same area. So we were very intentional, especially my wife, who's the designer in our relationship. It's certainly not me, but she's the designer in the relationship, and she kind of came up with a whole different color scheme and a whole different feel for each unit. So now on Airbnb,
our listings are all very unique. They all have different features that really stand out, and we can attract lots of different guests as opposed to kind of being the boring same listing over and over again, which you see in a lot of multi-unit short-term rentals. So because it's such an emotional process for people when they're booking a short-term rental, one of the main things you should think about when it comes to design is how your pictures are going to look and feel. And so we'll do certain aspects, like you can see right behind me, this ceiling in the bedroom, we've put wood in there on the ceiling. We put hardwood across the ceiling, which is not something you typically see, but when you look at the pictures, it stands out so much better than just a stark white ceiling like you see everywhere else. And we'll do big murals on the wall, and we'll do different colored tile in the bathrooms and in the kitchen so that each one has its own unique style and feel. And then finally, when it comes to amenities, really in our area and in a lot of affordable areas, you don't need to go over the top when it comes to amenities. And a lot of times, extra amenities can just be a cost center and be a lot more logistics in terms of keeping up with, like adding a hot tub and things like that. For us in an area like this, we needed to provide a gathering place because we could potentially have 20 people in one group renting the whole place. And any one of these units that sleeps 4 people isn't a great place to gather. And we know that in the wintertime, it's very unlikely that we're going to have large groups staying here anyway. So we weren't super concerned that we don't have an interior gathering place, but we needed to create an exterior one because we're thinking through who that ideal guest is. And so if this big group comes, we want to have the big fire pits. We created that. We poured a pad where we have 3 large picnic tables so they could, all 20 people could eat together if they wanted to outside. We have this big, beautiful porch in the front with rocking chairs. And so we offer some of these amenities that aren't breaking the bank, but they do make a big difference and make the experience much better for our ideal guest. So now let me share with you how a deal like this is going to bring in for us over $4,000 a month, every single month going forward into perpetuity while it's appreciating, while someone else is paying off our mortgage, and while we're getting incredible tax benefits.
So here's how the financials work out for this property. So you can see the purchase price is $403. So I said we bought it for $415, but the seller actually gave us $12,000 worth of credits because there were some issues that came up during the inspection, like there's a small foundation issue and a few other items. So we were able to negotiate an extra $12,000 of credits. So the net purchase price was actually $403. Closing costs about $5,000. After repair value, so we're estimating it to be worth somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 after we're done with the repairs. You can see what the taxes are, the insurance, and the repair costs are about $170,000, probably closer to $175,000 is what we spent on it. Spent about $40,000 to furnish all 5 units. Then we're going to skip the conventional part because we used a private loan to fund this deal. So we brought some of our own cash to the table. And then we borrowed about $500,000 from private lenders. It's just normal people with an IRA or 401k that they wanted to self-direct, and they're getting a 10% return on their money. So now we can go over to the income and expense side of the equation and see how that works. So across all 5 units, we're estimating about $140 as the average nightly rate in the peak season, which I think that's extremely conservative. We're already seeing a couple bookings show up at quite a bit higher than that, and then $100 across the low season. So we're counting the peak season as 150 days. So if we have an 80% occupancy, which is extremely doable in the peak season, over that 150-day period, which is about 5 months, and then we have $100 on average with a 40% occupancy in the off season, because it's obviously going to be a lower occupancy and lower price point when the demand is much lower, but that's over 215 days. So that's over the majority of the year. We're going to bring in about $127,000 before our cleaning fee. So that's over $10,000 a month. Then we factor in our cleaning fee, another $15,000. So we're going to gross on this property $142,000 on this relatively affordable 5-unit property. And so then we can incorporate in our expenses. So you can see what the private loan costs us on a monthly basis, which we're going to refinance out here very soon. And you can see I'll show you what it looks like after that's refinanced. And then our insurance costs, property taxes, cleaning, and then, our utilities. Obviously, we're going to be paying those because this isn't a long-term rental. It's a short-term rental. We're going to have to cut the grass and have snow removed in the wintertime. Consumables is like paper towels, toilet paper, a bottle of wine we leave for each of our guests. So we estimate about $100, a little less than $100 per unit per month. And then maintenance, obviously, you always want to set aside maintenance and capital expenditures just so that it's accruing, so that over time, when you do fix things up, you have that money there and you're not counting it as part of your cash flow. So if that's the case, we're going to have $3,600 of net cash flow, but that's with the private money still being paid at 10%. So now when we come to the refinance calculations, now the after repair value, like I said, is $750,000. So the bank is going to come in, appraise it, say it comes in right at that. We'll see, should be somewhere around there. That means the loan amount will be $562,500, which is 75% of 750. So then we'll have some closing costs there. We're estimating an APR of 7.5. It's actually been a bit better than that recently on these investment loans, but we're going to go on the high side. And if that's all the case, then our new payment's going to be $3,900 a month. $59,000 we'll have to leave of our own cash in the deal. We'll be able to refinance out all the other cash, all the private money out of this property. So we'll leave $59,000 invested and we'll make $4,001 every single month going forward. Obviously, it'll be higher in the summer, lower in the winter, but that's average monthly income across the entire year of just over $4,000. And so the amazing thing about this deal is when you look at the cash on cash return, we're getting 81% cash on cash return. So that means on this $59,000 that we leave invested, we're making an 81% return just from the cash every single year. So that's just from the income every year. That does not include the all the appreciation that we're going to create with this property, the principal pay down, the tax benefits, all those other benefits that come with owning real estate. That's just the return from the cash flow alone. So if you compare that to, say, a mutual fund, which is on average about an 8% return, you're getting 10 times the return on this deal just from the cash flow, not counting all the other benefits.
So hopefully this has helped you realize that you did not miss the opportunity to invest in real estate, because you can do deals exactly like this one in today's environment. I've interviewed probably about 275 really sharp real estate investors on the Living Off Rentals podcast at this point. And when I asked them, what is the thing you wish you could do different as you look back? Almost to a person, they always say, I just wish I would have started sooner, right? Everybody wishes they would start sooner. But I guarantee you 10 years from now are going to be so excited. You today is going to be the biggest hero for you 10 years from now if you start buying properties like this one that kick off incredible cash flow. Nobody knows what prices are going to do. Nobody knows what interest rates are going to do. You can't predict that. But if you buy a property that cash flows incredibly well, like several $1,000s a month, you know that over the long term, properties appreciate. And also, somebody else is going to pay off your principal, so equity will accrue. You'll create a whole bunch of wealth while you're collecting a check every month. You're collecting all this income, this net income after all your expenses. And so that's a very good position to be in. So again, if you want to work with me personally through this process, you can go to the link that's in the description. You can set up a call with me, and I'm happy to walk you through how I work with people, the step-by-step process to get you to the outcome of the absolute highest cash flowing investment possible. Thanks for spending time with me today and checking out this video. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.